the rules that were set or the expectations that were set around what success is and what you should be doing with your life, they can change, and they should ultimately be defined by you more than anybody else. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the podcast. And I'm starting with a question. My question to you is, do you see yourself as a success? Pause. Thoughts? What do you think? Be honest. This question has been on my mind for ages, since I went out to a party and I was talking with some friends and someone asked the question, do you see yourself as a success? And most people were like, no, I don't. And I thought it was so interesting because I looked around the room and I saw people who had the houses, the jobs, they had everything. They had whatever those things are that people say make you successful. They had them. And I was like, this is so curious. And the way that people said no, it was like they were saddened by it. It wasn't like, oh, no, I'm not, but I'm working towards it, or I've got the energy. It was very like, no, I'm not a success. And I thought, this world has been so tough on us, right? We've been tough on ourselves because even when we reach certain milestones, we still feel like we're not quite there yet. And in that moment, it became really clear to me that success is actually quite subjective. And it should be subjective, actually. It's actually quite objective, which is why people still felt like, oh, they hadn't got there yet, wherever there is. And I was like, this actually should be a subjective thing, because for me, it's not about any external marker. It's all about being able to define it for myself. And when I think about my parameters of success, I do feel successful. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And it doesn't mean I don't have goals or other aspirations. It just means that I'm confident and I'm comfortable in the journey and the direction and the trajectory of my life right now. And I think that's really important to be able to define success for yourself, because otherwise you'll make purchases, you'll choose partners, careers, aesthetics that just put more pressure on yourself in ways that make you feel even more unfulfilled. So you might be asking, okay, so for you, what is success then? Why do you feel successful? And if I was to define success for myself really simply, it would just be living on my own terms. That's it. As long as I'm operating, testing, experimenting, and making choices that feel like my own, I'm successful. Even if things don't work out, I've made that choice, I've made that decision on my own volition, and no one can kind of take that away from me. Success to me isn't having the right job or getting married on time or any of those things. It really is about when I go to sleep, and I've said this before in an earlier episode, when I sleep at night, do I feel comfortable in the life that I've created for myself? Because at the end of the day, after all the voices are done, after all the comparison is done, it's only going to be you. Even if there's someone that sleeps next to you every night, it's only you that has to live with the thoughts in your head. It's only you that has to live with the knowing that you've pushed yourself to meet your potential, or knowing that you've taken a different route. And that's the most important thing to me. And I remember when I read Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, she was talking about how women especially get chained by the shoulds of life. I should be this, I should be that, I should be that. And being able to just get rid of all that is actually incredibly freeing, because you're like, actually, I shouldn't have to do anything. All I have to do is be true to the blueprint of my life, as opposed to shoulding and aligning to other expectations of other people. And I think that's kind of really important, because when you realize that the rules and the standards that other people have set, they're imaginary, number one, and they are shifting goalposts, they move all the time, you actually realize that actually these rules aren't helpful for me. They're created by someone else, someone who's probably in power, to maintain the power structures or maintain the dynamics that benefited them, which could work for you, and that's great, but sometimes they actually don't. And I think it's worth being open to challenge visions and pictures of what someone smart said that makes sense, because the truth is we're all the same. It really reminds me of Michelle Obama's book. I remember she spoke about this at length, this idea that all the smart and in charge people, they're not that different from you and I. She said that when she became first lady, she walked into the room with, CEOs, presidents, whoever, and she thought, oh my gosh, I'm, imposter syndrome is heavy here, because who am I in comparison to these guys? And when she got there and heard what they were saying, she was just like, is this it? Is this what I've been building myself up in and feeling bad and feeling not good enough to be part of? Surely not. And I think that is a good metaphor for life in general. people don't know things, and it doesn't mean you don't have experts in certain areas, but I think the bigger principle that I'm trying to kind of emphasize here is that the rules that were set, or the expectations that were set around what success is and what you should be doing with your life, they can change, and they should ultimately be defined by you more than anybody else. Like, I always wonder, when we're brought into other people's concepts and ideas of success, it frustrates me, because I just think, how many times are we going to trade what our soul like needs and was made for in exchange for something else that someone created? Like, how many times will we feel boxed in by external goalposts that someone else created? When goals shift from, getting 100 likes and followers to getting 1 million likes and followers, to earning 6 figures to earning 7 figures, from having marriages to then having the right number of kids, to sending your kids to the right place. Like, it just never changes. And that can be quite exhausting. That can be tiring, because those systems and those practices and those goals, they never end. And I think that's why people at the party didn't feel successful, even though they'd reached certain milestones, because I think the truth is, once you reach one milestone, another one like pops up in its place, and it's like, now you need to work towards this, which is a good thing. But I think it's all about your worth and where you see your value coming from, because if your value isn't hitting that milestone, the minute another one that's further away pops up, you suddenly start to feel unworthy again. And that's what really struck me. That's what shocked me, when people were saying like they feel unsuccessful, even though they had the markings of success for people our age, is because things had come in. I say people our age, I mean people my age, because new things had popped up in their place, and it's just like an endless treadmill. And I think that also applies to the workplace. I remember this phrase that I heard when I was maybe like 21, starting my career, and it changed my perception of my career forever. Someone said to me, I don't want to climb up a career ladder only to realize that it's leaning against the wrong wall. And I think that's it, right? You can chase, you can push, and then you're like, wait, did I even want to be here? Is this the area? Is this the scenario? Is this the environment that I even wanted for myself? I've put in so much effort, and I'm like, where am I? And I think that's the thing that we have to challenge when we look at images of success and how we define that, and where our worth comes from within that definition, that can free us, or that can keep us chained as well. And don't get me wrong, I love targets, I love goals, I love manifesting, I love bringing things to life and making things like tangible. This is not to say that you should see yourself as successful now and like cancel all your goals and like just chill. No, I think it's really about knowing your gifts, your skills, and being able to align those to your bigger purpose and why you're here on earth, and be able to work towards that. And I think working towards something that is aligned to who you really are actually gives you the joy and the confidence to say, yes, I am successful right now. And also allows you to kind of hold two things at once, and allow two things to be true at once, which is, yes, I am successful, but there are things that I still want to work towards. It doesn't mean that I've finished. It doesn't mean that I've arrived. It doesn't mean there's nothing else left for me to do, but I can live in those two realities, and I don't feel bad about it. And I think that's the key. Once you're fixed on the big picture, so for example, one of my big picture things is just being able to like serve communities with my creativity and with communication. The how becomes optional. I don't really mind taking a step back, what people see as a step back, or taking a step sideways, if I know that this is going to help me serve the bigger picture. I've taken steps in my career, quote unquote, backwards or paused, because it's allowed me to have the mental space to maneuver and continue to pursue the bigger goal. And I think when you're firm on your vision, but you're flexible in your steps, you stop judging yourself so harshly. You're not like, well, I should be here by now. You're like, you see to the end. And it's funny because one of my sisters said, you really romanticize longevity, like being old and the end goal. And I think that's because when you look at people, all my role models are like over 60 now, but in the old days they were over 50, but they're like over 60 now. And that's not super old by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the idea is that when you've lived for a couple of decades, 5, 6, 7 decades, you can see the big picture clearer, and how small maneuvers feed into where you want to be long term. And the things that we antagonize in our 20s and 30s, they start to get smaller when you look through a lens of someone who's 60, 70. And I think that takes the pressure off, and it makes people feel less anxious in the long run. I think because I have the clarity of that bigger picture and I'm moving towards it, even if the steps don't look great, I'm willing to always risk like looking good for the wider cause. And let me tell you a secret, being able to kind of build up your ability to risk your image and risk what looks good breaks down your pride. Because to me, pride is just insecurity like wrapped up in bravado. When you risk your image for the wider cause, for the big picture you're working for, your confidence and your focus becomes unshakable, because you kind of like you've ascended and you've transcended other people's expectations, and you begin to feel successful because you've like, I don't need any external approval. And I think this is also where this whole thing of like success and worth comes from, is that most people don't see themselves as successful because those particular things that others would approve of, that they've then digested as their own standards for approval, they don't exist. So how do you get there? How do you get to that position where you feel like you've ascended or transcended external approval and you're living life on your own terms? And I think the first thing to do is take a leaf out of will.i.am's book. So I recently watched an interview with him and Stephen Bartlett, and he literally said, I got out of my current predicament because I didn't live in my current reality. So I had to live in a realm that I dreamt of. And I think this idea of dreaming is really interesting, because basically what he's saying is something that someone once said to me, a spiritual guide said to me, a pastor said to me. He said, you have to superimpose yourself into your reality, which sounds really dramatic, and it kind of is, but we're talking about mindset shifts here that allow you to kind of elevate your life. So let's be bold and let's kind of be a bit woo-woo about it. And it's this idea that sometimes we get frustrated by where we are in life because we can't see the marketers. But like will.i.am said, you kind of have to just dream that you're in a different scenario. So I'm like, okay, I'm in this position right now in my life, but I know that I could be in X. I'm imagining that in my head. I'm a dreamer. As much as I'm very practical and I'm very focused on action, I also dream, and I allow myself to dream and live in those areas. And I have seen that become manifest in my life over time. And people are like, how did you do that? How did you get there? And I'm like, before I could even take action, before this could even materialize, I had to see and believe, because before you can even live in that reality, like will.i.am says, you can't live in something that you don't believe to be tangible in some way or some form, right? So you have to be able to kind of behold and imagine, and then believe that it's possible. And that's how your brain starts to rewire. We've spoken about neuroplasticity in episode 11. Like, that's how your brain starts to rewire and conspire to help you make that a reality over time. And I feel like the TikTok streets, they call this the Delulu era. And I feel like it's not that delusional, to be honest with you. And it's something that I've been practicing way, way before any of that phrasing even existed. You know, God gifted us an imagination for a reason. And I personally see like a healthy imagination as like the seeds that are sown for a new reality that we can access in our lives. And yeah, I just feel like that's just not delusional. I actually think that people that can live and believe based on what they see that's not physical, you probably see clearer than everybody else, because everybody else's sight is limited by what's around them right now, whereas your sight is only limited by your imagination, which in theory is actually boundless, which I think is an exciting and a really good thing. But let me know if I'm getting too woo here and too like kind of all over the place. And a passage that always like kind of reminds me of this principle is Numbers 13 and 14, where God tells the Israelites, he says, I'm giving you this land, go and have a look at it. Bear in mind, he just said, I'm giving it to you. And they have a look and they see that there are settlers already there. And they come back and they're like, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. And this idea that not only did they see themselves as like basically unable to kind of take the land, like as they saw themselves as like a smaller, weaker being, but not only that, but it also says, and we looked the same to them. And this idea that how you see yourself starts to manifest in how other people see you, right? So you can't even pretend or hope that, well, I have no confidence and I see myself as less than, maybe people still see me as better than. It's unlikely. You obviously are gifted. We're all gifted with people who support us and can speak life into us and can kind of identify things that maybe we've not seen. But in life, it's also very important to not outsource that work to other people, and to always prioritize doing that work for yourself, changing your sight, changing what you behold in your imagination, because that's the key to being able to bring some of these goals and these aspirations to life. I remember in a conversation on Better Together, and I'll link everything in the show notes. So if you are watching this on YouTube or listening to this somewhere, definitely check the newsletter show notes. They'll be linked. And on Better Together, one of the guests said, God never coddles our insecurity. And that's real. Like, he sees what's real in us, even if it's not visible. But he will also be like, okay, you see yourself as a grasshopper? Now you can't. Sorry, you have to see yourself as the person that I've called you to be. Like, he won't be like, oh, well, that's fine. Just, don't expand. Don't go beyond the box. No, he'll say, come out of the box. Come out of the box and be who I can see you as. Be who I can see you as. And this is always funny to me. This always reminds me of the verse, like, God looks at the heart, because we use that verse as an excuse for, like, oh, I had good intentions, God looks at my heart, which is true. God does look at the intentions. But the context of where that verse came from was in First Samuel, I think, where, it was First Samuel, where God is looking for a warrior, and David is basically called by God, but his family members don't even put him in the lineup of brothers who could potentially be this warrior king, because he's the youngest, he's like the weakest, he's not the tallest. It literally says he's not the tallest. And I think it may even say that he's not the best looking, but actually maybe that was Saul, but it says that he's definitely not the tallest. And God's like, no, none of these guys in the lineup are the part, even though they looked it. So, and it always makes me laugh when people in the world and in society, we look at people and we judge them based on what we think they bring to the table, whether that's because of their reputation, because of their appearance, because of their social media presence. And we think this person's going to bring me more value than this person. But God actually looks at the heart. God looks at the potential that's within. And as long as you kind of align your sight to God's sight, i.e. looking at the potential that's within you rather than your position now, you can transition in a similar way, right, to David, from, being the like shepherd boy in the back that didn't even make the lineup, right, to becoming the king of Israel, which is literally, and one of the greatest kings, right? That's literally his journey. And I think that's really emblematic of this idea that human beings, we look at the external. Human beings behold what we can see and we make judgments, but God looks at the heart. And I think it's not just about how we should see other people. Obviously, this is a big lesson in valuing people irrespective of how valuable on the surface we think they are, but also to yourself. You can be in that room even if you don't feel like you can be today. You can be in that room because of the potential that lies within you. And I think even subconsciously, that has been a way that I have lived my life. And I think that's what gives me the confidence to say that I am successful, not because I have the most of anything or I am the best at anything. I don't make any list. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not really about that. And I think that's also why I've never cared about other people's approval, because I understand that the greatest, most transformative things in our life, they're actually unseen. And if we get carried away with what is seen physically and we don't kind of see metaphorically or spiritually, we miss out on so much. We miss out probably on the most important thing. And that's it. I think when you're able to focus on your dreams and your potential on the inside and be committed to the process of bringing that to life on the outside, no matter how long it takes, I think that's where you feel satisfied. That's where you feel confident. That's where you feel successful. That's where you feel free. And in due time, all of those things start to become realized, start to manifest themselves on the outside as well. So, guys, that was a bit deep today. I feel like it got very, abstract. Maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but it really is all in the mind. And I feel like these episodes are becoming slightly more psychological and spiritual and a bit motivationally. But these are just the things that are in my brain. So thank you for rocking with me. Again, same things I always say. Subscribe to the YouTube, please. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Take What You Need Podcast. And more importantly than ever, message me with questions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Has this helped you in any way? And let me know what else you would like to talk about. I'm looking forward to more episodes as always.